All right, coming up late on a Sunday night, this is the 49ers Report. I'm Chase Senior. We'll be back in the studio tomorrow, but for now, a video from the house. Latest 49ers injury news, an update on how Trey Lance performed at practice today following the really impressive preseason opener, and then we'll get to more Jimmy Garoppolo to the Browns trade buzz. But first, I want to hear from you in the comments section. Question of today's show: where are you watching from? People were tuned in from everywhere, literally everywhere, during our watch party on Friday night against the Green Bay Packers. So represent where you're tuned in from in the comment section right now. As for the latest 49ers injury news, let's just run through it player for player. I'll offer some of my thoughts before we move ahead. Drake Jackson, a stinger, not expected to be a serious injury. As I talked about during our winners and losers segment, watch that if you didn't already. I thought that Drake Jackson had a really impressive debut against Green Bay on Friday. The bend coming around the edge, his activity, maintaining that balance and lining up on both ends as a left defensive end and a right edge rusher. All of that stood out to me before he went out with that stinger, but not expected to be a serious injury. As for Curtis Robinson, the linebacker, groin strain, going to be out for about a week. Don't expect him to make the roster. Danny Gray, after just the highlight reel-worthy play with Trey Lance as they linked up for that 76-yard score, out for a few days. Hip and back soreness for the rookie third-round pick out of SMU. As for Arik Armstead, he's been absent all throughout training camp. Obviously didn't play in the preseason opener either. If he wanted to, and if the team wanted to, he could return this week. Obviously, he's a huge factor along that defensive front for San Francisco after he played very, very well last year as a hybrid edge and defensive tackle. But the reason why he's probably not going to return this week, as for the Niners' schedule, they go to Minnesota for joint practices with the Vikings. So San Francisco going to err on the side of caution, take it easy with him. In Kyle Shanahan's press conference, he said, quote, "We're a little more hesitant for his first practices back to be against another team. So the odds are we'll wait on him, but he's doing a good job." So things trending in the right direction for Armstead. Emmanuel Mosley, Hassan Ridgeway out a few days because of those muscle injuries. And then we go to the offensive line. It's been the concern for this football team. It's going to remain the concern for this football team. Not just because of these injuries, but the inexperience from all across the board outside of Trent Williams. Mike McGlinchey, knee irritation. Kyle Shanahan saying the good news was his surgical repair on that right quad, and all the stuff he did this offseason was good, but he has some slight irritation in his knee, so we're going to be smart with him this week. I'll be surprised if he does anything in Minnesota. So that's somewhat notable. It might not be serious now, but as he rehabilitates that quad injury, which is, of course, a massive muscle and a huge surgery to undergo, it directly also affects and links up to your knee too. So if it's a recovery thing, a compensation thing, the fact that he hasn't played football in a long time, taking live snaps like he did in that first series, and he's just coming back from that, that's good. If it's connected to the torn quad, that's a little bit of a concern. As for Daniel Brunskill, a little bit of a concern here. Hamstring going to keep him out a few weeks. So what that means is he's been competing with Jake Brendel to be the team's starting center. Brendel did, I thought, some solid stuff against the Packers. That means that he's going to be the starting center, and he's never been a starting center in this league. I understand Chris Forster, offensive line coach, coached him in Miami and saw him, coached him up, and was part of the reason why Brendel came to San Francisco, but he's totally unproven. Now, on some of the blocks out in space, getting to that second level on Friday night, I thought he did a couple of good things. Speaking of that offensive line, some of the clips that you're seeing now on social media, that's what happened on the game tape with Spencer Burford. He is nasty, and I love that nasty streak about him. Very aggressive. He was pancaking dudes all throughout that game against the Packers, so that's a good sign, but with Brunskill going down out a few weeks, that means that Jake Brendel is going to be the starting center for this football team. Before we continue to keep it moving, if you haven't subscribed, do so right now. Free daily videos on the San Francisco 49ers, whether I'm at the Chat Sports Studios or here at home. And because the Niners will be traveling to Minnesota this week for joint practices, type FM in the comment section because FGB worked pretty well last week for the Packers. Latest on Trey Lance, and we'll get to Garoppolo. For Lance, training camp update today. Non-padded practice, on Sunday afternoon, threw consecutive 8-yard touchdown passes to George Kittle, Trey Sermon. Then he went 2 of 10 from that point on. Some drops, some throwaways. That's what makes the completion percentage look the way that it is. Was intercepted, though, by Fred Warner. I do have some interesting, though, Trey Lance, Jimmy Garoppolo statistics that I want to relay from Warren Sharp. And I said the other day, and I've said in the lead up to the season, I think the offense with Trey Lance can be more explosive than it was with Jimmy Garoppolo just because he's a more explosive quarterback, right? But with that, they might be less efficient. Is that a bad thing? Some interesting numbers here. So obviously, San Francisco showed throughout Garoppolo's tenure that they can win with him, but they don't necessarily win because of him. In the last 5 years, his yards per attempt at 8.4 yards is first in the NFL. That's crazy. So yards per attempt, how many yards he's attempting per throw, for those not familiar, is 8.4, nearly 8.5. But along that, he is also 42 out of 43 quarterbacks in air yards. So the yards per attempt is a good number, but beyond that 8.5, he's not throwing many deep shots, deep balls at all, because the air yards with the throws is 42 out of 43. That's really noticeable. And last year for San Francisco, they had 6.8 yards after the catch per completion. The NFL average is 5.2. That's number 1 in the NFL last year for the Niners. With Trey Lance, it was 7 last year. So NFL average 5.2. With Trey Lance, small sample size, 7. And last year, the Niners were 6.8. So with Lance, they were actually better. And we know that he throws the long ball a lot more efficiently, and he's more dangerous with that type of throw and element to his game as compared to Garoppolo. So the offense might be less efficient, but more explosive this year. And really what's going to be important, how does Lance perform late in games? Obviously, that's going to be critical in these close games because the NFL, majority of them decided 7 points or less. It's going to come down to how Lance performs in some of those late game situations. Lastly on the show, the hot internet report on Jimmy Garoppolo. Saw this on Twitter. So, according to a report, Cleveland Browns brass expecting a full season suspension for Deshaun Watson after he weirdly played in that Friday preseason game against the Jags, which he didn't look good in. Very inaccurate. Rusty, probably. Special talent for sure. Weird guy with what he did. Now they're strongly considering a potential trade for Jimmy Garoppolo if Watson, of course, is suspended the full season. And the Browns brass, according to this report, expecting a full season suspension. Now, with that report, talked to someone familiar with Cleveland who said Browns want the 49ers to pick up part of Jimmy's salary in any trade scenario. Nobody knows what will, my thoughts on that. So, okay. They talked to somebody familiar with Cleveland who said Browns want the 49ers to pick up part of that salary in any trade scenario. But if the Browns are desperate, right? And they don't have faith in Jacoby Brissett, Josh Dobbs, Josh Rosen to play for Cleveland all year, a team that's ready to make a deep playoff run, then do the Niners have leverage against the Browns if they're desperate to trade for Jimmy G? And San Francisco says, no, we're not going to pick up part of Jimmy's salary because you guys need Jimmy Garoppolo. I think ideally what San Francisco can get back, maybe a third, fourth, fifth round conditional pick that turns into a fourth. I'm looking at something like that to get some type of value back for Garoppolo. And San Francisco might have the leverage when it comes down to these trade conversations if Cleveland doesn't have faith that Brissett can be a full season starter as compared to maybe helping them survive for 6 to 8 games. Here's the reality, though, and I teased this a little bit ago. Nobody, and I mean nobody out there, knows what's going to happen with Deshaun Watson's suspension, outside of maybe an idea from the NFL. But other than that, nobody has a clue. Not a source familiar with Cleveland, nobody within that organization, Watson and his camp. Nobody knows. I do know this, though. If Watson is suspended for the entire duration of the 2022 NFL season, I've continued to say, and I'll continue to say it, that the Browns make a lot of sense for Jimmy Garoppolo. Will he get dealt there? Give me a Y for yes, an N for no. That's going to do it for the show. Just wanted to give you all the latest 49ers news and rumors late on a Sunday night. A little bit of a weekend roundup. I know yesterday we did the 49ers preseason against the Packers, winners and losers, but had to get you updated on all of the injury news, latest on Jimmy Garoppolo, and of course a Trey Lance update. Back in the studio tomorrow, looking forward to chopping it up with all of you. Tuesday live show, of course, will go live on Call-In after that for a podcast, and then the Niners taking on Minnesota Vikings, week 2 of the preseason. Another watch party coming up this weekend. Appreciate all of you for tuning in. Catch you tomorrow.